Welcome back, everyone, to the Owl Pod, the official podcast of Temple Athletics. I'm your host, Kevin Copp. Thanks so much for being with us. Today is a very special episode. We have our first returning guest. We got someone to come back. It's Vice President and Debbie and Stanley Lefkowitz 65 Director of Athletics, Arthur Johnson. Now, Arthur was on the program back around the holidays, a two-part episode where we talked about his life story growing up in Thomasville, Georgia, and the career path that brought him here to Temple. So I encourage everyone to go back and listen to that if you haven't. But today, we have a very specific reason for bringing Arthur back on the program. This is to discuss his role as one of the 12 sitting members on the NCAA Men's Basketball Selection Committee. As we enter the second week of March Madness, you've likely heard about this committee in the news, as they are responsible for, among many other things that you're going to hear about in our conversation, selecting the field of 68 teams in the NCAA Men's Basketball March Madness bracket. If you're a total sports nerd, I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation as we get a privileged look inside a room that is beyond closed to the public, and I'm very grateful that Arthur took the time out of a very busy schedule this time of year, as you'll hear about, to talk to us about this interesting side gig and also the potential effects and benefits it might have for us here at Temple, particularly for our men's and women's basketball programs. So here is our Vice President and Director of Athletics, member of the NCAA Men's Basketball Committee, man of many hats, Arthur Johnson.
And we're back with the action. Coke Zero Sugar might be the best Coke ever.
That's right, Jim. With an irresistible taste and zero sugar, Coke Zero Sugar is a must-try for any sports fan. So make sure you... Wait, Jim, I didn't mean try it right now. We're still on the air.
Best Coke ever? Take a taste, Jen.
Really?
No, not right now, Jen. We got a game to call.
Impressed and happy that you're awake right now after I'm catching you at the busiest time of the year, and you were already very generous with your time. We had a two-part episode that I encourage everyone to go back and listen to about your story, your path here to being the Vice President and Debbie and Stanley Lefkowitz 65 Director of Athletics here at Temple, which I think is a great story and well worth listening to. This is related to that, but slightly different today. And I want to talk about your role on the NCAA Men's Basketball Committee, and particularly this time of year as we're sitting here. This is Monday after the first 2 weeks of the NCAA tournament. The selection committee is the big boogeyman that's in the news, and it gets a lot of play in sports media, and you have a very unique opportunity to be sitting inside that room, getting privileged to be a part of leading those discussions. And again, for all of us that work in college sports, I think there's nothing better than NCAA March Madness. It's really something incredibly special. And so I guess to start, for folks that are kind of coming into this a little bit blind, would you just tell us about the work that the committee does? Obviously, it's really newsworthy right now, but the work that kind of goes into being on the men's basketball selection committee.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kevin. I think you mentioned something at the start of this about it being a privilege, because it absolutely is a privilege to be a part of it. I'm humbled by it every time I walk into that room and sit with 11 of my colleagues, whether they're conference commissioners or fellow ADs, and then working with Dan Gavin and Joanne Scott and the incredible staff at the NCAA basketball staff that helps run this. One of the things that I didn't understand before getting on the committee is that the work that takes place all year. So we meet several times during the year, mainly via Zoom, but we do have an in-person summer meeting, an in-person fall meeting, and then we have a meeting, obviously, in person to get ready for selection. So it's called a pre-selection orientation, so that we all get used to what we're going to go through in 3 weeks. We're about 3 weeks out before we go there, but we're involved in all aspects of the tournament, all of the administrative things that happens when you're deciding on locations, you're deciding on hotels, and cities come and present to you to make their case for why they should be hosting a Final Four, or you get a report on the bids that cities submitted to host first and second round or to host regionals, and that's usually 4 or 5 years out. So that's a very interesting process, but you're part of that whole ecosystem. In addition, our media rights partners, our partners at CBS and Warner come together, and WBD, they come in and they visit with us. They go through their metrics. They go through requests that they want to want from us. Sometimes we'll get those requests in advance so that we'd be prepared to talk about it. Sometimes they come up on the spot. We'll also get a great recap of the tournament and what the metrics and what the numbers look like from a social media standpoint, viewership, just the interest, the number of countries. I mean, it's a full, probably 100-page report that provides everything. Obviously, they have an incredible corporate partners program. So they come in and they'll visit with us, and we'll get that update from them on where we were and, you know, whatever deals are coming up, what might be renewed, what might not be renewed, are there new categories that we're going to open, and then also ticket pricing. So determining ticket pricing, that happens. We work with the CFO or the business office at NCAA to try to figure out what the goals are. We've asked for, you know, like a 4 or 5 year forecast. What does this mean? The tournament, while it brings in over $1.1 billion a year, that money goes back to the membership. So that's a very big responsibility to try to make sure we get the right value, but also make it where people can afford to attend it and everything that's there. What's amazing, I share with people, is we'll get to early February and we got 8 first and second round sites around the country, plus the 4 regionals. We'll get into those meetings, and on average, 93% of the ticket inventory is already sold out.
Wow.
And they have no idea who is coming to play at that location. And to just think that you have that kind of interest, where people will go ahead and buy in advance, and they have that excitement of going. The teams that make it in that for that first weekend, you know, they only get 350 tickets, so it's not like, and you can't hold them. And then for some, you might be across the country, so you may not be, if you got a large allotment, you may not be able to move them that quickly. We have a lot of focus and a lot of discussions on the student athlete experience. So we're trying to make sure teams that get into the tournament, that those students, no matter if they're the number 1 seed overall or the 68th seed, that their experience is the same when it comes to things that we provide for them, whether everyone's on a charter. So if you're under 400 miles, you can bus or you can take care of your own transportation. If you're above that, you're going to get a charter from us. So that's a process that takes place. And then there are real true rules and guidelines on who can be in that travel party that the NCAA will reimburse you for. So you can't pass on the band to take other people. So you got to take the band, you got to take the cheer, the mascot. There's a limit on the number that can be on the bench. So there are a lot of administrative things that we're a part of. And then once we get to, once we get on site, these next few weeks are extremely busy. 1 or if not 2 members of the NCAA selection or the NCAA committee will be on site. And when you're on site, you're there to be the person to deal with any problems or issues that come up. Now, I will say we got arena operators, and there's an NCAA rep, and then they'll send a contractor who's worked a number of tournaments as well. You're part of that team that's making some decisions of, okay, if we got 4 locker rooms, for instance, last week, 4 locker rooms were available, who's going to get which locker rooms? So you try to take care of the highest seed, make sure they get the best locker room. However, that may not always work out the best way, because we try to make sure teams don't cross on the court. So we try to make sure when you go out of your locker room, you're not crossing back of the house, you're not crossing across just to avoid any issues. So you have to make a determination on logistics. So a team may come back and complain, well, we're a higher seed, why are we in a smaller locker room? Well, you're closer to your bench.
Right.
And you would be complaining if I had you running all the way to the other end. You would lose more time in halftime. But it's truly an honor, and it's a lot of work. I'm so appreciative of our leadership here at the university, starting with President John Fry, when he came on board, and in one of my very first meetings with him, I shared with him that I had the privilege of serving on this and wanted to make sure it was okay, because from late February through the national championship game, I can be away and be occupied. Now, we do get to work. We have a committee room that we can go in and work, like when the team is practicing for 90 minutes. I can go back in there, or I can sit at the scores table with my computer and knock out emails. But if I got a private call I need to make or some things that I need to do, I can go. You do have time to do that. You have time to get away. But my other colleagues on the cabinet and our coaches, our leadership team here in athletics, everyone's been so accommodating and so supportive as we go through it.
Well, that was one of my questions. Is I'm sure you get that call, right? And this is your third year serving on the committee?
Yes.
So you get that call, and there's only 12 in the entire country. It's athletic directors and conference commissioners. So, I mean, this is almost as big an honor as there is in terms of a committee to be selected for. You can make the argument in your seat.
Yes.
But I mean, you just heard it described. That's a full-time job that you just described. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of work, and I imagine at this time of year, and you have a few weeks left, but, I mean, Vice President and Director of Athletics, big-time job, a lot to consider. Being able to manage both of those, I'm sure, is very tough, not just for you, but for everyone on the committee. That's a balancing act.
Yes, it is, and it's a very, but we understand the privilege and the awesome responsibility that we have there. We also know, and we've come to learn, that you really depend on and lean on the NCAA staff that works on the basketball all year. That's what they do. So they do a great job of prepping us and getting us to that point. And then those of us who've been on the committee more than a year now, we understand the routine and we understand the cadence and how do you fit those pieces in. I was very fortunate this year to be in Philadelphia, so I didn't have to leave as early. I didn't get home. I'm not getting home today versus driving home last night, which was a lot better. My first 2 years, I was very fortunate because I had Thursday, Saturday games. So I was back really in the office on Sunday. So I would come into the office, knock out a lot of things, be able to meet Monday, Tuesday, have a regular schedule. In fact, I met some coaches. So first year I was on the committee, or second year on the committee, I was able to meet with Coach Fisher, Coach Richardson, and Coach Keeler on a Sunday, just before set it up. Hey, I'll be in on Sunday. I need you to come over. And so you just plan it out that way and understanding what you have. We do get schedules of what it looks like in the participant manual. So Tia has access to that, so she's able to schedule certain calls or conferences. So I'll do Zooms. For me, like I said, when the team is practicing, I can go to the top of the arena and get on a Zoom. Now, I don't show the court because we're not supposed to be showing practice.
No state secrets being given away, yeah.
Yeah, and going back as a part of what you asked me before, you go when they're on site, you have this pre-tournament meeting with all of the administrators from all of the institutions who are there. You got this whole protocol. They got they got a lot of information in Teamworks already. So they use Teamworks, which is a platform that we use for a lot of our communications and some internal things. And a lot of institutions around the country use them. So it's just natural that they have the contract with NCAA. So you upload all your documents, your flight manifest, your bench seating, your credentialed people. You load all of that stuff in there. So we have this administrative meeting to go through it all, where the TV timeout coordinator is there, the TV coordinator, the media, tickets, facilities and operations, just making sure everybody's on the same page. Because if you don't follow these things, then we're having discussions in May and in July about a letter that will go to your AD and your president that might have a fine attached to it. So that's the other piece of it that comes into play. So understanding that cadence really helps now, but it's a lot. I will say we are all responsible for conferences that we monitor. So when you're monitoring those conferences, for instance, this year I was assigned to the Patriot League, the Summit League, and the Sun Belt. So I'll try to watch those games when I can early in the year, especially watching the favorites, getting information, and then we'll set up conference monitoring calls with their reps. So they're conference commissioners are usually involved with their basketball liaison. We'll meet December, January, February, March. They'll give me information. I say to them, hey, I would like to know this information when we meet. Tell me your top 4 teams. Give me some metrics on them, and give me some things that people really wouldn't know about. I don't need your net. I don't need your Ken Palm. I can get that information. Give me some things that are unique about your teams in your league. And then same thing continues in January, then February. Then at that point, you start realizing that some teams probably don't have a shot. And especially in a league like what we went to this year, that everybody's not going to make it. So once teams are eliminated, then you don't have to watch them as much. So I get to download a lot of games. I watch them at 1.5 speed. The good thing is I get to watch our games as well. I can go back and pull those up if there are plays or stretches that I may have missed at a home game or something distracted me. I can go back and try to see, okay, what happened here? And so I'll go through that whole process, but they'll give us their recommendations on, okay, we think this is the number 1, number 2, number 3 teams. At this point, probably don't need to pay attention to them, but then once all the teams who are going to be in the conference tournament or just before the start, I'll ask for a report on all of them, because obviously anybody could win. Now, that means if they didn't have a great year and they won, they're going to probably be a 16th seed.
Sure.
And that leads into, we try to give the 16th seed as much consideration, the 4 16 seeds as much consideration as we do the 1 or 2, because the goal is not to disadvantage the 1 through 4 for having a great season, and then you misseed someone that's a whole lot better than their seed, and all of a sudden you got one of those matchups that's not good.
Like Arizona's saying, hey, that 15 seed Princeton, they might have been needed to bump up a spot or 2.
yeah. So if you miss on that, it's really that. If you miss on it, then you disadvantage. Like I said, they don't want to disadvantage the other teams.
Well, that is obviously, again, I think where the work of the committee becomes the most salient to your casual observer is the week leading into Selection Sunday and the picks being announced, and then all the recriminations over who got snubbed, who was overseeded, who was underseeded, who got the quadrant of death. And you hit on this. My question to lead into it was, how much basketball can you possibly squeeze into your free time? You've covered that, but and I'm not asking you. I know that the committee's deliberations are highly sensitive. I'm not asking you to reveal any inside info, but in that room, obviously, you have all of this information now, and there's so much in terms of analytics and net, KenPom, offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency. There's so many numbers, and then there is also just, you're all athletic directors, you're all conference commissioners, you're all sports people. There's the eye test. There's kind of the old school, just watching games and seeing how does all of that kind of fit together in the stew to end up getting the final picture that we get when we see the 68 teams released on Sunday?
I think the easy part, Kevin, is that we know that there are going to be, in this case where we are today, 31 automatic, what we call AQs. So that means we got to select 37 to bring into the tournament. And going into this, everybody's considered a part of that 37 initially, because even if we know that they're going to likely win their league, let's say the Autonomy 4 and the Big East, if we cannot assume that they're going to win their league, so those numbers you'll start increasing one, because some of those will go from that at-large pool into the automatic qualifier once they win their tournaments.
Like Duke, for instance. They were going to be in anyway. They won the ACC tournament, so now they get that AQ.
Now you got to select 37.
Right.
So, and that number goes, so you're monitoring and you're watching that. I think all year we have an opportunity to watch games. I'll download a lot of games on the iPad and watch them when I'm traveling, when I'm on a plane. I'll watch late at night. The conference monitors or the conference people will say, hey, we got this game coming up. You may want to watch it. So I try to watch some of those games. I've had West Coast Conference in the past and Mountain West, and then I don't sleep a lot, so it really helps me being up late at night watching some of those teams play and seeing how they play, so you have the eye test. And then I do have about 3 or 4 people who help me with information and with data and with watching, and I'll get feedback from them on it. So going into that, we'll have to make some decisions on, okay, before we get started, we meet the Sunday before to talk about what the week's going to look like, and then we'll talk about be prepared when you come in and say, okay, what are your 24, we would call at-large teams? That would be anyone that you would say would be in the tournament at large, no matter what, if you think they're a 6 seed or higher.
Okay.
If you don't think they're a 6 seed, they need to go under consideration. That group, in that group, you got to get a certain number of those votes. If you show up, if the school shows up, let's say 10 times, I think it's 9, but if the team shows up on 9 ballots, then they would be in. If you don't show up on those ballots, then you would go to under consideration, and that list could be as big as you want it. And then you'll take that, and then you go vote based on out of that group. Okay, give me your top 8 in that group in no particular order. Based on the number of votes, it shows that top 8 would show up. Now take that top 8 and rank them 1 through 8 or 1 through 4. Or rank them 1 through 8, the top 4 will move over.
And so slowly, piecemeal, then that's another group that's locked. Okay, they're in now. They're untouchable. And we'll get to the seeding part later, but we know they're in.
That we know that they're in. So, and it starts that way, and then there are discussions and deliberations when you're going through it. Again, and this is what I say to people: the first 55, 56 are easy.
Yeah.
We might get the seed wrong, but don't call and complain to me about a seed when you're in the tournament, is what I say to my friends and say to people who will say, don't call me about that. You're in the tournament. You got a chance to play. You got a chance to win 6 games. Mm-hmm. If you win those 6 games.
You're not taking the calls from Rick Pitino at St. John. You don't want to hear about the 5 seed from St. John's. You're in. You control your own destiny. You're good.
You control your own destiny. You're good at it. So you go. It's the last 10 to 12, 13 that are just really difficult, because you know what the tournament means to schools, to student athletes, to communities, to coaches, what that looks like. And you may not have as many comparisons, where there may not have head-to-head games. They are in totally different conferences. The metrics are different. Some may have been able to get some games that were quality games, or you could be in a conference where it's not as strong on the back end, and so all your metrics and numbers from quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4 looks different. So you're just trying to make a lot of using the data that we have at our disposal, plus incredible knowledge for people who work in the basketball. At the NCAA for basketball, like David Warlock is a guru. He'll give you information. We'll talk about, okay, TCU lost its first game of the year to a team quad 4. How did that happen? David quickly says, hey, first 9 minutes of the game, they lost their center for the year. And they were just kind of out of it.
Wow.
Didn't happen. And then, but he knows this about teams throughout the country.
That's impressive.
And then they pull it up and it'll show player availability. If we say, okay, why did so-and-so lose 3 games in a 5-game stretch, and they lost to 2 teams they probably shouldn't have lost to? And they'll say, yeah, these people were out. This person averages this many points or rebounds, or he's a glue guy. And came back here, and when they got back here, they got better. And then the conferences will also share that kind of information with you. So they're trying to make sure they give you the best data to go into the room to represent them.
I'm going to have a long wind up to this question, but I think we'll get there, and I'm not going to put you on the spot. But speaking of this whole deliberation, one of the, I think, biggest stories in college basketball this year was Miami of Ohio.
Yes.
Undefeated regular season, 31-0. They lost their first game in the quarterfinal of the MAC championship. And so you have a team that did not have a very good, in fact, had a very poor strength of schedule,
right,
particularly in the non-conference. And the teams, they're on the bubble. They're being considered. And the teams that they're being compared to are teams like Auburn, who have a much worse win and loss record, but in a much more difficult conference. Obviously, many more Quad 1 opportunities and Quad 1 wins. Not asking you to get into the specifics of Miami and Ohio versus Auburn, but what I want to bring that back to is I'm sure that having the ability to sit in this room, be privy to these discussions, is giving you, now Arthur Johnson, the athletics director, the ability to come back to Temple and say, hey, I'm able to understand a little bit of the roadmap in terms of what works, what's being valued. Are you able to bring some of that knowledge from these deliberations? And it's not as easy as just saying, okay, hey, get more Quad 1 games in the non-conference. As Miami of Ohio would attest,
right,
they allegedly picked up the phone 75 times and got 75 no's from power conference teams. And I know that our coaches have talked about some similar frustrations in being able to schedule those games. But does being a part of those discussions help the Temple hat, and the way that we kind of evaluate our basketball programs? Because obviously this is where we all want to be.
Absolutely. I think for men and women, from my first year on the committee, I came back and had those conversations with Coach Fisher and with Coach Richardson and with the sport administrators at the time and the scheduling people. However, I do know how difficult it is. You can't make people play you.
Right.
And I know in basketball, schedules are controlled almost 99% by the coaches. In football, they're not as involved. ADs are in the middle of all of that. So it's unique. So basketball gets to do that. They're a call, but they always want you to come on the road. Or now they're may not be giving you opportunities to go on the road. So I understand the frustrations that Miami of Ohio would have, or a High Point would have, if you heard his comments. Mm-hmm. So it's challenging because once you go on the road, it's much harder to win. On the road, the home team is going to win most of the time. And the others, if they're at a place where they drive a lot of revenue for home games, they're trying to keep their home games, or now they're going to play in these MTEs. But they also understand the metrics, so they're trying to play teams that won't impact you as much. So we do come back, and we've talked about it. That's how we ended up playing a neutral game in New Jersey a couple of years ago, because that's better than playing at home. Because if it's going to be a Quad 4 game at a certain level, maybe it's now a Quad 3 game because you're a neutral site.
This is playing Monmouth and
Trenton. So trying to work through some of those pieces to help with those numbers. Because once we get into conference, unfortunately, right now we don't have a strong enough conference where all of your games are going to, elevate you. In the larger conferences, they can probably get 14 Quad 1 opportunities. And then if you lose one, it doesn't hurt you as much. If you win it, it helps you a whole lot. Mm-hmm. So you got to start to discern the difference in the opportunities. But what it comes down to, you ask that question, winning matters. Winning is the thing that will matter. We talk about who did you play, how did you play, how did you do? So even if you get a ton of Quad 1 games, if you don't win them, it doesn't matter. For us, what I've also learned, and you've heard me sell this, and you've done a couple of presentations for me, winning where it matters is important. And I say to our people who ask about the scheduling piece, we need you to show up no matter who we play. It needs to be about Temple, first and foremost. Secondly, we especially need to win in conference. Mm-hmm. And the example that I'd give, if we had an opportunity to play 3 of the Blue Bloods in basketball in the preseason, and we went on the road and won 2 and won 1 at a neutral site, we'd all be really, really, really excited. However, once we got to conference, if we went 500 in conference, they would not ask me to leave the room to talk about Temple. So we need to win as many of those 18 conference games as we can win, period. And especially today, because you got to get into the top 10. And if you can get into the top 2, you get a bye to the semifinals, which is closer to your ticket to the postseason.
Yeah, not to diverge too much, I think the new format for the conference tournament, it was a terrific idea. I don't know if that's Commissioner Pernetti or what body of people came up with that, but I do think it makes a lot of sense for a mid-major conference where your bids are going to be limited in the current environment we're in to protect the integrity of the regular season and to reward your best teams. And I know it didn't work out for South Florida this year, but I think it puts the conference in a place to succeed, which benefits us all.
Yeah, no, it does. I think it also puts more value on the regular season. You continue to play hard, and you towards the end, you got those who are jockeying, and we were one of them for that, 7, 8, 9, 10 to get in and make sure you're not 11, 12, 13.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it made for some more competitive games towards the end, and you realize that they all matter. And then on the front end, those teams are trying to win because they were trying to get a bye. But going back to the tournament, I think scheduling, we talk about that a lot in there, and they know that there's some frustrations with teams trying to get games and trying to make that happen. But winning your games matter. And if you go back the last 50 years, this year we'll celebrate at the Final Four the Indiana team, 1976, the last team to go undefeated, win a national championship. In that time, there have been fewer than 5 teams who have finished the regular season undefeated. Let that sink in. And how difficult what Miami of Ohio did this year is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just said there were 275, let's say 300 teams over 50 years.
150,000, quick math? Yeah.
So, and you only got that fewer teams that have been undefeated. And then we got data analytics that said, okay, if these teams played this schedule, they might have 4 losses. They might have 5 losses. So there are things that, again, Warlock and the people in the room can provide data and information for it. So it wasn't. But now where it comes into play is when you start scrubbing. That means you're comparing 2 teams against each other. And so when you start just those 2 resumes go up, so they might be in the tournament. However, when I start comparing them to some of those teams that were there all of a sudden, that team would probably jump them. Then you compare them to the next team. That team's going to probably jump them if you just do the numbers. So seeding is where that would come into play and impact them, but getting in the tournament, not as much. And you're rewarded for playing great basketball. That's beautiful basketball to end up undefeated.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, one of the lines of conversation, this is another digression, but one of the conversations I don't like is, a lot of people get upset. People got upset when the play-in expanded to the 16 seeds and say, that's not fair. A team won their conference. They're not getting a chance to get into the quote, real tournament. And now with the 11, Miami of Ohio, they had an undefeated rate. If you've ever been to Dayton and you've been to those first 4 games, that is a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous environment. To get into the financial aspect of it, you get a much better chance to win and get a share for your conference. I was arguing when I spent some time at the Ivy League. I said, guys, you want to be in the 16. You want to get in that play-in game. Go beat Mount St. Mary's and get a full share for winning a game. I think it's a great opportunity for those teams.
Oh, absolutely.
Is there anything better than a 16 beating a 1? No, but I'll tell you what. Those 16 seeds, Prairie View A&M, beating Lehigh, and getting to say we won a game in the NCAA tournament, I actually think it's a great opportunity and not a punishment. That's just my 2 cents.
I agree with you 100%. And now we got commissioners who understand it, and they're lobbying for
They say, hey, move us down, get us in that
plan.
plan.
Sure. Get us to Dayton, and you get us to Dayton, and we'll have a chance. And I think it's an incredible opportunity. Now, it happens in a hurry, and it turns over fast. And they find out Sunday, then they're going to play Tuesday, and then play Wednesday. But the truth is, these kids are used to playing a lot of games.
Yeah.
They've been in the AAU world for a long time, so they play games in a short turnaround, and they're at that point they're excited to have another opportunity to play. And on those nights, you're 2 games that are on, so you're getting all of this publicity for your institution. You're getting all of this, the kids getting this exposure, and then if you win, the next morning you're part of the tournament. You're on ESPN. They're talking about it, and and like you said, the financial piece is really big. So you can imagine the financial impact with lower resourced conferences that game makes an impact more than it might for a conference that has the highest television contract.
I can imagine what that conference office was like when Prairie View A&M won. I bet there was some celebrating going on down there. But last question, and again, thank you for all of your time, and this has been a real treat just for, I think, anyone interested in college sports to get to hear about this. But I'm sure you, as a kid, filled out brackets. I remember getting the New York Post and cutting out the bracket, and I'd, fill it out and hang it on my wall. And, when I was 7 or 8, this is probably my earliest memory of college sports before I ever followed college football growing up here in the Northeast. It is, I think, the most special thing about college sports still is March Madness. And I'm wondering, having such a privileged and such an inside view of it, have you been able to keep the kind of magical? You just saw 3 games in 2 days in Philadelphia at the Xfinity Mobile Arena, are you still able to have that same enjoyment and that same appreciation, or has it grown in your estimation now, seeing kind of all the sausage being made behind the scenes? Are you able to keep that kind of college dream alive?
Yeah, it's incredible. I think, as you know, we got Talitha and I have a 14-year-old son, Aaron, who follows it. He put a huge bracket up on the wall. He told me he was doing really good until yesterday. So I don't
a lot of brackets got busted yesterday. Yeah.
but to kind of watch him get involved with it and hear he and his teammates and even some of his people from school talk about it, and then they have no idea of what I'm involved in, and because he won't really say anything about it. But but for me, it's still surreal. It's an incredible opportunity to sit courtside and watch teams practice and prepare. So in addition to the open practice that the public gets to come to, because of being on the committee, I get to sit in and watch them walk through their 90-minute practice or 30-minute practice and hear the game plan, to hear how a coach teaches, to see drills and routines and see, what they do, and, they can bring in their own music, so you can kind of get the sense and the taste of the music and see how thorough they were. I think last year, to see Duke walk through their plan for Alabama for the right to go to the Final Four, and to understand, what he talked about, and then to sit there and watch that game plan being implemented was special. Like, wow, it's just what he talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
In the walkthrough, because there's no one else in the arena, so you can hear everything, and they trust that we aren't going to go back and share what they're talking about. Now it's really interesting because we have to take all of the cameras that's in-house. They have to be covered up, and then the one at the top of the goal has to be turned around away from the court. So it's all of those kind of things that come into play. If I go up to the top of the arena to watch the practice, they might send security up there and say, hey,
who's this guy?
And I say, I was the guy that gave you the ball to get started.
Yeah.
I just needed to make a phone call, and I wanted to watch. But it's still, again, it's a privilege. It's humbling. It's surreal. But I also get reminded, like yesterday, it's these young men are playing at a very high level and they're playing hard, and it matters to see the emotion when they don't have the success, or you see a career come to an end, or now obviously someone may not be coming back to that institution, that coming to an end. Seeing the excitement of the teams that advance or win, and the passion of it all. But during that, we didn't get into it. Part of my responsibility while I'm there is I'm also evaluating the officials. So the officials are also in a tournament. So whether they're going to advance or not.
Those decisions are made round by round?
Yes.
Wow.
So, and we have an official evaluator who is on site, and that person, and then I got notes that I keep, and for me, I'll track, like, I got notes that I'll write down on every foul, every dead ball. It does two things for me. It helps me stay focused on the game, because I'm supposed to see how the referees, the officials manage the game, if they make the right calls, if they, not that I'm an official, but I got somebody that'll back it up. And so after the game, I have to go back to the locker room, meet with that official evaluator. We'll both talk about what we saw. I lean on them heavily because that's what they do. That's what they've done all year. And then we have to call that in to to basically headquarters and give it to Chris. So like, hey, we'll strongly consider, strongly recommend going forward, consider, or not consider.
Wow.
So those are the three options. And so when you meet with those officials, we have a meeting with them before it starts. Then also have the privilege of getting the officials. I know who the officials are before, and so they cannot get the official assignments into an hour before tip, so they don't know who's working their games. So I'll walk in, see the coaches, unless there's a school that says, no, don't give them to the coaches. You need to give them to this person. So you go find them, and then at halftime of the first game is when you go back to give it to the teams that are playing in the next game. So you have these, so I get a little paranoid about don't leave this notebook laying around, because I know the assignment. And it's a lot, and the officials don't know until that day as well what games they're going to work. No, it's the day before when we get in that officials meetings, and then we have to stress to them, you're not to tell people what your assignment is. And so they have their routine. We go see them, and we got a call today to talk about, who will advance. And then at 6:00 today, those who are going to be in the next round will be informed that congrats, you've made it to the next round.
Wow.
And then we'll do the same thing for the Final Four with the 12 officials. So we will select. I was on the officiating subcommittee, or I am on the officiating subcommittee and the ticketing subcommittee. So we will determine at the start, they had 109 officials, with 9 being alternates, but 100 who would work the tournament, and that number will slowly go down, and I think we'll end up with 12 for the Final Four. But again, we'll announce who's working the Final Four. You just won't know what game they're working until 1 p.m. on the we'll release that at 1 p.m. on the day of the semifinals, and we release it on social media at the same time, so that everyone, and especially people interested in sports wagering, get it all at the same time. No one is at a disadvantage.
Wow. I mean, there is no stone unturned is one of my big takeaways. Yeah. And I mean, again, having worked in college athletics for 20 years, I knew so little of this. I think this will be a real treat for people to get to hear some of the inner workings. Again, I think it's tremendous for Temple to have Temple University represented in the way it is. I can only imagine a fraction of the work that you're doing, the sleep that you're giving up to make this happen, and I know the tournament's off to a great start, and I wish you a successful couple of weeks. And I know we're all grateful to have you having this experience, and it's great to live vicariously through you a little bit.
Yeah. No, well, thank you, Kevin, and again, I can't stress enough the appreciation and how humbled I am to be on the committee, but also the support from the leadership at Temple. and that's been every president that I've had an opportunity to serve under and serve here with. They've all been very supportive of it, and that's a big piece of it because my role here is more important to me than that, but they also recognize the value of having me serve on that committee.
All right, that's this week's episode of the Owl Pod. I want to thank my guest, Vice President and Debbie and Stanley Lefkowitz 65 Director of Athletics, Arthur Johnson. I want to remind you that David and Amelia will be back on the Tuesday edition of the Owl Pod with an all-new episode this coming week. Check it out anywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, owlsports.com, you name it. The Owl Pod is everywhere. Check us out on Instagram at the Owl Podcast. Next Friday, I'll be back with men's crew head coach Brendan Cunningham. Great conversation. You want to check that one out as well. I want to thank our entire Owl Pod team, our executive producer Dan Lobaz. I'm Kevin Copp. Thank you all so much for listening, everyone. Goodbye and go Owls.